right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And Jacob, it's here. He is here today, all the way from England. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm not doing too badly. I'm improving slowly. Post-operatively, my physician tells me, but I'm waiting anxiously for the results of my blood chemistries from Wednesday. So we shall see.
Amen. Well, there's lots of people praying for you.
Yes.
And praying on your behalf that you recover. And you've been recovering fairly well. And I remember
I'm more
time here
functional now, but I'm still struggling, but I'm more functional.
No problem. I think we're all struggling in some way or some form. So you're doing good. In fact, when you were here, it was really, encouraging you. You look well. It was just a matter of getting your strength back. That's really all it was.
Yes.
A matter of strength back. So praise the Lord for that. And another person.
Efforts with my nose bleeding and everything was pretty bad. Being drowsy from the meds was pretty bad.
Those meds, man, they're sometimes as bad as the disease. Another person that here with us is Jay. Jay, how are you? You're in the control room taking care of the back.
I am well, and I'm here to say I have good news and bad news. The bad news is Joe Biden is still president. The good news is Jesus is coming.
Amen.
I like to focus on the second part of that news.
Me too.
The other part, man, it's like a nightmare, really. Another person's here with us, Davey from Australia. How are you, Davey?
Doing pretty good, thanks.
All right.
Doing pretty good, thanks, Mark.
Welcome on a Saturday morning for you. Welcome those who are watching from different parts of the world. It's Saturday for some. It's Friday night for others. It's actually noon here in California. It's rainy. It's snowing up in the mountains, and we're still dealing after the aftermath of that snowstorm that hit up in here in the Crestline, Big Bear, Running Springs, Lake Arrowhead area that has been really troubled. A lot of people. There's still people trapped in their own homes because of the snow. Very little has been done about that, but then again, there's California. So I know believers are up there and they're ministering the gospel to them, feeding people and helping them. So many prayers to them. Some of them go to our fellowships and we're not too far from there. So it's kind of an interesting thing. California snowstorm and it's raining again today. So many prayers are actually
had a lot of snow in Britain this past week.
Has they
a lot of snow in Britain? Unseasonably late winter.
Yeah, you're dealing with the middle of March now, just about the middle of March, unseasonably late winter. Yeah, so very good. Jacob, any announcements that we have? I just want to make sure that we cover that. We got some podcast announcements, but just want to make sure that we get the announcements out of the way for you.
Well, because of my illness and hospitalization in California, I'm back in Britain, of course, at the moment. My speaking engagements, most of them had to be rescheduled. We canceled most of everything that was in February. The new speaking engagements, as well as the Scottish conference details, are available online on moriel.org on the itinerary page on our website. So please avail yourself of that. Just to remind people, we have our live streamed Thursday night Bible studies. We're continuing our series in the Epistle to the Hebrews. And of course, as always, we have a number of other features which appear on Moriel from Calvary Church of Devore and from various other places. So please avail yourself of the resources we have. Moriel.tv, morieltv.org, and of course our website, moriel.org, and our Facebook page. All there for Jesus and all there for you.
Amen. There's lots of stuff going on, and even on our podcast schedule has been increasing and ever growing. And in fact, I think we added Jay, when we're going to have the new episode out yet? Ken's Corner, is it out yet?
The first episode of Ken's Corner dropped this week, and next week we will have episode 2, which will be recorded tomorrow.
All right, we'll keep that in prayer. It's been it was a lot of fun. I was so blessed to be at the first one. And I felt like a fly on the wall, just listening and learning. So if you haven't got a hold of that, get a hold of Ken's Corner. But there's many, many wonderful episodes from Sandy, from Jacob. There's guests. We have some of evangelistic tools there and at the podcast in terms of sharing the gospel. Yours truly is there. and we're just going to keep adding on to this podcast schedule. So you can go on. In fact, you can watch it on your screen now. I think that's going on right now, Jay, the podcast schedule, and you can find yourself, you can avail yourself of that on the website and also on the YouTube channel. You could also find so many different podcast platforms. So we want to welcome you, those who are watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on Vimeo, on Telegram, on RTN, on Moriel.tv, our flagship. And of course, those who are watching, which one are we missing? Rumble.
Rumble,
Yeah,
we're missing Rumble.
Yeah, Rumble. Rumble is our one of the
Vimeo.
fastest growing ones. Fastest
Yes,
to grow.
it is.
And we welcome you because we take questions on Rumble. In fact, we're going to take questions on Backstage for Jacob. So start thinking of the questions as you're watching and as you're praying and as you're listening, and then send the questions in. We'll take them on Backstage. And we got a loaded Backstage. In fact, so loaded, we had to go through many of these things pretty quickly just to get there. And so avail yourself of the podcast, avail yourself of the videos, avail yourself of the information on Moriel.org. There's many information about missions. There's more information coming out about India and the Philippines soon. So what else? I think that's it. I think it's been wonderful. It's been growing. Jacob, I got to think as we start, I have this thing. 3 years ago this week, the world went into lockdowns. The world went into lockdowns. Now, China had already started somewhat a little bit, but the Western world, I mean by the rest of the world, caught on. It was Europe, then it was England, then it was the United States. It was this week. It really changed society. And I wanted to ask you a few things. How do you think it changed society? How you think it changed the church? Because it really began a domino effect of people, some people believing it was a big deal. Some people believing it wasn't a big deal. Some people for the lockdowns, no lockdowns. What we know of the aftermath has really destroyed a lot of people. That destroyed people's lives, destroyed people's income, destroys people's businesses, and in a lot of ways, it changed the way the church is today. Some people never came back to church. Some people just resorted to online churches. So some good, some bad, some destructive. But just wanted to get your thoughts. 3 years ago, and by the way, it was during that time we started catching up. So we've been through the evolution of this process. So over to you, Jake.
Well, here on Moriel because I'd be as guilty as anybody.
That's right. That's right, Jacob. Thank you. And it is true. It is true. A lot of what was said, it was looking back at it now, it's a complete lie. It's a complete farce. What's interesting, and my main concern has always been the church and the people, the body of Christ, how divided it became. I mean, you and I lost friends, lost friendships over like what we see now. There were obvious lies that people believed. And because we didn't fall into the lies like they did, they decided not to be friends. And
Yes.
it was sort of a sad situation. But that to me is the biggest crux of the matter. It really divided the church. It really became a reason to divide, a reason not to be in fellowship, a reason to stay away from the truth. And a lot of people were sideswiped with
What are
false
Christians
claims.
to think when Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, says Jesus Christ would have taken the vaccine?
Yeah.
Well, my
That's
wife
crazy.
and myself prayed, not that we criticize other Christians who did take it. We don't. But my wife and myself prayed, and we distinctly believe that the Holy Spirit showed us not to get vaccinated.
Right. And obviously looking back at it, you see so many problems that have been created from it, and some of the fallout from that. David, you wanted to say something real quick?
You touched on it pretty much about the division it caused, and the people, good close friends that we saw fall away and turn against us, that kind of thing. One thing I just want to caution everybody: let's learn from it. I think it's a thing we should all learn from. We've gone through a lot of battles over the years. The church has gone through a lot of battles, and each time some tempest thing comes up, people sort of see and they react, and they go one way or they go another. And we get these splits and divisions unnecessarily so happening at times. And when people don't want to reason, I just hope and pray, look, now that it's over, that we don't forget what's happened, and that people learn from it. So we're going to go through more things. This is only we ain't seen nothing yet compared to what's coming ahead. There's going to be more things that are going to cause splits and divisions. So I just pray that next time people will act biblically, not just act on emotion out of fear, but examine all things and pray, and just don't divide from your brothers. Just,
we saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of fear. We saw a lot of abandoning the fellowship, and that's been 3 years, and it's been tumultuous, to say the least. We finally
Marco,
starting.
It occurs to me, now that we've talked about it a bit, obviously the lack of God in society is partially to blame for this breakdown, but in everything since COVID-19, it's a breakdown of privacy. You cannot have medical privacy. You have to have every medical thing now is, the government's business. You cannot have privacy when it comes to your finances. Everything needs to be going through ESG. What you spend will be scrutinized, and you'll be told how to spend your money. And now, along with that, with the moral breakdown, you have to proclaim what you do in the bedroom. You have to let everybody know what your self-image is. Again, the concept of privacy is that is needed for freedom. If you have no privacy, then you do not have freedom, and that is being destroyed by society, bulldozed.
But the real demonic element of what James is saying is your right to bring your children up according to your own spiritual and moral values being infringed upon by the corrupt education system, by the wicked teachers unions, and by the federal bureaucrats. This is the evil of the evil.
Yeah. We've seen it mushroom. This is the point was we've seen it mushroom the last 3 years. So it isn't a day that will leave in infamy in terms of how things changed. And you see kids today, they were too young during that time, and now they're growing up, and they're growing up in an age where things change. When these things came about 3 years ago, and I think we'll keep looking back at a marker like Jacob talked about, the marker of 9/11, the marker of the subprime lending 2008, the marker of 2020. It's going to be these markers that we go back and see. Another marker, and not to get too far into, because we're going to talk about these points later on, was when the internet got sent over and it became under Obama, it was turned over to the UN. And ever since then, you talk about privacy, Jay,
Yep.
that went out the window. Talk about surveillance, that became a real problem, because no longer was the US, sort of regulating the internet, the IP addresses and things like that. It was now giving into the hands of China, Saudi Arabia. These are wonderful nations that love freedom, and they're the ones in control of it now. So let me start off with this, Jacob. We talked about the one issue was 3 years ago. You mentioned Biden. He comes on to become president during this time. Looking back the last 3 years, he comes president,
Yes.
wins the election, a lot of questionable things. We won't talk about that right now, but right away we realize mentally he's been gone. He's been gone for a while. Mentally he's gone now, but the whole administration is just a sideshow for diversity. The whole thing is a sideshow for diversity, meaning that they bring people in like Sam Britton, who's just more known for his stealing women's clothing and at the airport than anything else that he does for the administration. One thing after another. You have what is that man's name? Rachel Levine. Yeah.
Levine.
Who's in giving, admiral status, and it's
A four-star
supposed to
admiral claiming to be a woman.
Yeah. The whole thing is a charade, but here's one thing that we have to be really thoughtful of this. No matter how much we think he's gone, he's also very evil. He's also very evil. And even if people want to give him a cognitive test to prove he's mentally competent, the things he says and does are absolutely outrageous. He said before he became president, open borders, look what happened. War with Russia, look what happened. Surveillance, look what happens, right? So it doesn't matter if Fetterman's dead or not. It doesn't matter if Biden's mindless or Harris's, cackles and laughs every time she speaks. It is a total evil administration that is bent on the destruction of what little left of society of Judeo-Christian values had at that moment. Now it's, as Jay said, it's just been destroyed. Censorship at an all-time high. Jacob, talk to me about Biden administration, mentally ill or not, is evil, and talk to me about the censorship that is coming, the censorship industrial complex that we're looking at it before
If
our
you
eyes.
look at this year, Spain, Germany, France, and Russia, despite the sanctions and the war, will all have a higher growth in GDP than Biden's United States. Russia will have a 2.1%. United States will have a 1.2%. Russia will have twice the amount of growth in its GDP than the United States under Biden, despite the Ukraine and the sanctions. This is what you're dealing with. What's happened with the price of oil, the empowerment of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela by Biden. It's just a betrayal of America. Now, middle class, the Democratic Party's war on the middle class is reaching a new apex. The Democratic Party is at war with the middle class. Of course, we know that Biden is just a senile stooge. Barack Obama is probably the real president, operating through Susan Rice, but it's certainly not Biden. He's just a stooge. But you're right. He's an evil stooge. He's a sinister man. Well, with declining family incomes in the United States, inflation, recession looming, he wants to raise taxes on who? These things are going to hit the middle class inevitably. People who have less money, he wants to tax them more. What can he do about it? He can't deny it. So they want to sequester free speech. They want to do what Putin does, and they want to do what China does, because Obama and Biden are no different than Putin or Ping.
Yeah, well said.
They're the same piece of demonic cloth. They're all the same. Sequester free speech. In China, all national industries are in collusion with the party. Here, you see the high-tech companies are in direct active collusion with the corrupt Justice Department and a corrupt FBI that needs to be replaced by a
It's
legitimate
incredible.
criminal investigation organization or agency. The FBI needs to be abolished and replaced with something honest. It can't be reformed. It needs to be just dismantled and got rid of, like the IRS and like the CIA in its present form. These things need to be replaced, not reformed, but replaced. But what you have is a war against free speech. Tucker Carlson shows these films, and now Schumer and McConnell, the rhino, who caused the Democrats to retain control of the Senate in the last election, are up in arms that the public has got to see these films and know the truth about what's happened. How dare you let the people see the truth? Says a rhino like McConnell, and says a fascist, an enemy of democracy like Schumer.
In fact,
to have
Jacob,
watched
on
those
Backstage-
wicked congresswomen led by Wasserman Schultz attacking
Yeah.
left-wing journalists for telling the
Yeah.
truth about what goes on in social media and the collusion with government. It shows you that they're enemies of democracy. It's not just the Second Amendment. They're enemies of the First Amendment.
Yeah, you're talking about Michael Schellenberg and
Yes.
Matt Taibbi, who were
Correct.
before the Judiciary Committee, and they were basically harassed by the Democrats, saying, you're in collusion with Elon Musk. You're trying to destroy, the Democratic Party. You didn't show us you didn't show us the Twitter files.
And they're left-wing journalists themselves.
I know. So one of them said this. This is interesting. I never thought in my own country. He was an ACLU journalist, proponent of this. I never thought in my own country that freedom of speech would be threatened in this way. This is from a liberal. This is from not a
Yes.
conservative or a Christian. This is a liberal, left-leaning journalist who blew the lid of how the government was in collusion with big tech companies to censor people, this favorable speech. You said something the government didn't like, they would ban you.
Yeah. If you mention Hunter Biden's laptop, if you mention a lab leak from Wuhan, if you mention anything that contradicted their policies on same sex,
Yep.
then you are a target of a corrupt Gestapo FBI.
They call them so-called journalists. These guys have won awards. I mean, they're
Yeah,
not
of course.
like,
And not only that, they would have been singing their praises a year ago.
yeah. That's right. I think one of them works for Rolling Stone magazine or
Worked for
something.
Rolling Stone, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have been singing their praises because they blew the lid off of this. He says,
Hey,
"It's
look,
very
you know,
disturbing."
what Comey, McCabe, who's this present guy? McCall,
Christopher Wray.
Director of the FBI is what?
Christopher Wray.
Christopher Wray, Comey, and whichever one you have. McCabe, Heinrich Himmler. They're all the same. There's no difference. There's no moral difference among those people.
Yes, absolutely. Now they call them threats. They would call them threats to democracy. I mean, I love how they use these words, right? These journalists are threats
You're
to
showing
democracy.
the people the facts, and you're a threat to democracy because now we can't lie to them.
And it's all happening within the context of, the Federal Trade Commission, going directly after journalists and directly under attacking Musk for daring to expose these things. So as soon as Musk agrees to expose this, the Federal Trade Commission goes after him, and now they go after the journalist. And these are left-leaning Democrats. This is one thing that's interesting, Jacob. A lot of times, and this is, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I think even you mentioned it, other people have mentioned it too, that if the left keeps supporting these crazy ideas of censorship, it's not going to just be conservatives and Christians who are going to be censored. It's going to be them as well.
Of course.
They are not going to
follow
be
the pattern of the French Revolution. Robespierre and Bellot were executed by guillotine. And the same thing is going to happen. You already saw it today in the House with two left-wing journalists. They turn on each other.
Yeah. state sponsor thought police, basically. You meant this, you meant that, doesn't matter what you say. This is what you were trying to do. Did you see that? What was it, Debbie? Yeah, Debbie from
Washerman
Florida.
Schultz, yeah.
Saying that you profited from this. You took
Now,
money for
she
this.
had a Pakistani Muslim on her staff who left the country to flee prosecution, apparently, or something, who she was giving access to secret information.
Yeah. And she was the head of the
Now, why wasn't she
DNC.
removed?
Yeah.
Why wasn't Feinstein removed for doing the same thing with her driver?
Yeah.
Or that other guy, Swallowfield, whatever his name is, with his Chinese spy girlfriend?
Yeah.
Because the FBI will not ever look into those things.
No, of course not. The FBI will not go after the real culprits or with his real evidence.
That's right.
They're not
Yeah.
about that. They're not a national security agency. They're a political police force. They need
Yeah,
to be
that's right.
abolished and replaced.
But who's going to do that, Jacob? I don't see any possibility. Even if you get a rhino back in the White House, and you won't see any possibility
The
of that
rhino
ever
is the
happening.
same as a Democrat. You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Another thing, Jacob, that it's pretty prominent with this administration, what we've seen in the world, but especially here in the States, it's a destruction of children, family, and society, and especially women. Women who have been, pushing for feminism and all this stuff, and the third wave of feminism, or the fourth wave now they call it, and it's against men, it's against, the family, it's against the church. Well, the White House called for International Women's Day, and they were giving awards. One of the awards went to a man. Now, explain how this works. It's International Women's Day, but the award winner is a man from Argentina who's been fighting. He says it was because he was depressed and marginalized, and therefore he had to fight for LGBTQ rights. I'm speaking, of course, of Mr. Reda, and he was basically the first Argentinian undersecretary of diversity policies and all these women, gender diversity. But it's all women stuff. It's all women stuff. Yet himself a man, and he wins the sexual orientation and gender identity Ministry of Foreign Affairs, long title. A man wins a woman's award. I mean, I don't know what planet are we in, but explain this.
No woman ever became a 4-star admiral. Only a man pretending to be a woman can become a 4-star admiral. Let the feminists not complain that they can't win sports competitions anymore because they're competing against biological males. They brought it on themselves.
This is the tragedy of all tragedies, because as much as let's say Western women fought for rights and voting and women's suffrage and all that stuff, it's all gone. Forget it, because according to the White House, men make the best women.
Yep.
Yeah, make the best women. They also gave one to a neo-Nazi. Neo-Nazi won one. So being a woman in the States is a man, a neo-Nazi, and a terrorist. That's what a woman means, according to the White House. Now, it's about to make you crazy, but they also support all these transgender ideologies and books and sexual orientation for kids that few governors have had the courage to do so. DeSantis being one of them, Tennessee being another one, that they ban these books. Now, there's been a huge effort, Jacob, by the media. Again, the same media that says, it's free and clear and censors everybody. The same media says, well, they're just going to charge everybody for giving a child a book. You can't give a child a book in Florida. You'll get 5 years. Now, what kind of books are these? Of course, that's the question.
That wicked daughter of Satan, who will in all likelihood burn in hell forever, Joy Reid, was complaining that there could be prison sentences for giving these books to children. You're putting somebody in jail for 5 years for giving a child a book. She doesn't talk about the fact that the book has graphic pictures of unnatural sexual acts aimed at children.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
these books are
as Jesus said, and as he will almost certainly one day say to Joy Reid, because it's not likely she will repent, go to the place prepared for Satan and his angels.
Yeah, she's destroyed the lives of a lot of children and a lot of families. And she's basically supporting this idea that if you give a child a book in Florida, you're going to get 5 years. the law didn't say that. The law basically says you can't have pornography given to a child. You can't have aberrant sexual practices given to a child, and it has to be approved by the school board, of course, and the parents. That's what the bill says. That's what the bill's trying to show, that you can't really have these horrible books given to children. Now, this is in light of what happened in Florida when an 11-year-old boy and his father read these books to the county of supervisors, and they began to read the books, and they had to shut them down because it says, no, this is too graphic for us. You can't read them. And the dad just says, well, these are the books that you give my kids. You can't have it both ways. But this is exactly what they're doing, and exactly what they're all about. It's the destruction of the family, destruction of children, their thought. I mean, you and I watched that video, and it was pretty embarrassing. Even
go to the place prepared for Satan and his angels. You cause one of these little ones to stumble, it is better to have a millstone tied around your neck and be cast into the sea.
Yeah.
To your point, Marco.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Joey Reid, she's complaining about books being not being given to kids. You tell that same woman, okay, well, we'll let you have your books, but we're going to pray before every class. She'll go through the roof.
You can't pray.
Any kind of a book you want to a kid. How about a book about the Ku Klux Klan? I remember in the 1960s, the Ku Klux Klan had comic books for children in the South.
Really?
By her standards, we should be able to give them that as well.
Wow.
You can't arrest arrest somebody for giving a kid a book. It's only a comic book. Well, the Klan book should have been banned, and pornography should be banned, and Jill Reid should be banned.
Oh, amen to that.
How will
Absolutely.
a woman like that not go to hell?
It's kind of like that same notion, and you and I have watched some of these videos, Jacob, from the left-wing media, where it says children don't belong to parents; they belong to the whole community. They belong to the state, and they really do believe that teachers are, basically the freedom-loving gatekeepers, and parents are the terrorists that are keeping children from drag queen shows, pornography, and sexual education. LGBT. I mean, that's the part that I don't never understand. Why would parents want to take these kids to these shows? I mean, it is a depraved society. It is a depraved, immoral society now.
As we've said in our teaching, the new normal, the sins of the Canaanites are going to be the norm of planet Earth before Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
When the Hebrews displaced the Canaanites, that's what the world is going to be like. Parents killing their own children, sacrificing their own children, and so forth. Homosexuality, vile perversion. That is what society is going to be like before Jesus comes. The way that the children of Israel replaced the Canaanites, the raptured and resurrected church is going to replace the fallen human race who's rejected the salvation of Christ.
Jesus, that's right. That's right.
Don't be like the Canaanites. The teaching's called the new norm.
Yeah.
Jay, I have an answer for you real quick. The reason why parents will take their children to these things has nothing to do with the kids. Zero. You know what it's all about? It's all about them being seen there and them being acknowledged as an ally, as a tolerant person. It has nothing to do with the children. The children are props. They are used to position and posture for other people to see how good they are and how tolerant they are. Has zero to do
just
with
like the
kids.
administration. Just like the administration. They don't care about the people of America. Just simply, it's a sideshow of diversity. Look how tolerant I am. Very good point, Jay. Very, very good point. And parents have become that. Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on this as we get into. By the way, start sending your questions in now. We're starting to collect them, and on Rumble, get your questions in. We'll ask Jacob on Backstage. But I wanted to talk about this: the destruction of the family, destruction of women, destruction of children. It's really the destruction of population. I was reading this article, and Jay and I have been talking about this for some time. We brought it up here, but never really dealt with it as a whole, is the decline in population in the world. But one specific area that's troublesome is Japan. Japan's population is in free fall. Twice as many people are dying as they're being born. 2022 numbers, the number of births registered in Japan plummeted to another record low last year. Statistically speaking, about 790,000 births to basically far below the 800,000 that they had before. And the deaths are about 1.5. So the number of births in Japan have been declining, and it's at a 1.3 fertility rate and a 1.3 fertility rate. What you need in order to just maintain is 2.1. Far below. I mean, this is a time bomb. Aging population, low fertility rate, and basically no one's getting married, no one's having children. And these are some of the reasons. They said their attitude toward marriage, it's changed. That means married couples do not want to have children, especially the last 3 years since the lockdowns. And young people, feeling increasingly pessimistic, do not want to get married. So that's contributing to that. That's in Japan, that's in East Asia. I know it's near, the heart of Jay and our hearts too. We have a memorial office in Japan. Jacob, and then we'll go to Jay. What are your thoughts on this? This is a declining, aging population. It's a time bomb. It's a time clock that's going to go off. And now we're seeing it. We're talking about it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now we're seeing the spiral, and there's no end to it. They have no immigration, very little immigration. So there's no replacing of anyone right now. What's going to become of Japan, and what are your overall thoughts on the decline?
Okay, well, first of all, just let me point out very quickly that in addition to Danish, Dutch, and Hebrew websites, Moriel has a Japanese website.
Yes.
In regard to your specific question, Marco, there's one thing that stands out with an illuminescence of its own that I can't ignore. The precedent for abortion in the United States with Roe v. Wade was preceded by liberalized abortion standards in Britain. However, what happened in Britain and later the United States was preceded by what happened in Japan. Japan was the first developed country in the world, first developed country in the world to legalize abortion. They reap what they sow. You don't want babies, you won't have any. I do believe there is a cause and effect and a divine judgment. Also, if you understand the mentality of Shintoism, they don't really believe in a future per se. So they have to look to the past, to ancestor worship and things like this. So the spiritual focus, or if you want to call it spiritual, the religious focus of Shintoism is focused on the past. It's on ancestry. It's not focused on the future. So the idea of children and future are purely economic realities to them, or political or social realities. They don't think of children as progeny or perpetuity in the same sense that the Western mind does because of Shintoism. Perhaps James could comment better. I've been to Japan a lot of times, but James is partially Japanese and he's lived there.
So a couple of things going there. I'd start with saying that the majority of Japanese, even though Shintoism is very important culturally, it is a religion that has, for the large part, been debunked with the surrender of the imperial forces in the 1940s.
Yes.
And once a god loses a war that never has lost, a lot of the people lose faith. And to that point, most Japanese actually consider themselves atheists and realists than Shinto followers or Buddhists. That let's begin with that. Japanese, for the most part, are grasping for something, but they don't have any hope for the future. Like Jacob said, they're stuck in the current day's needs. Also, Japanese society, a lot of the young men in Japan, there's an entire boutique industry that revolves around men not being able to talk to women, therefore going to restaurants, coffee shops, and hiring girlfriends. And this is not in the sexual aspect. This is walk around, hold my hand, talk to me like we were boyfriend, girlfriend, renting them.
Wow.
And that's how serial inept the young Japanese are with talking to the opposite sex. That's how shy they are. That's how partitioned they are with the culture, which to say, the culture in Japan is all very much about entertainment, media, video games, computers, technology.
Yep. Yeah.
And the greater aspects of those, in high school where you have clubs and social interactions, once they get to adulthood, it's to the cubicle farms with them. And
wow,
between work, men don't have time to date.
Yep.
And women increasingly want to have their career rather than have children and a family. So they move from rural parts of Japan or less populated and move to the city, whether it be Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and they get jobs. And
Yes.
again, that sends the demographic even further, where women aren't interested in necessarily a relationship.
wow.
So it's very sad. And then you take into fact that Japan has really good longevity as far as people. It's one of the highest in the world. You have an aging population that's taking benefits. Well, there is no replacement and people working enough to pay for those benefits.
Right. Incredible. I was getting some information here. The birth rate among Muslims is 8. Birth rate among Muslims is 8 worldwide. Hispanics are about 2.5. I would say blacks, and I don't know if this is just worldwide or American. It's about 2. It's about 2. So you could see where population is heading. And I think same thing in Israel, same thing in other countries where,
except in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox can outbreed rabbits.
I see them.
They have a higher birth rate in Israel than the Muslims.
Do they have higher than the Muslims? Oh,
yeah,
man.
because it's a mitzvah to have a baby every year in case one of them is a son who's the Messiah.
It's the Messiah. Yeah, that is amazing. So you see how the fertility rate around the world is dropping. And this is not just Japan. Japan is like the poster child of it. By the way, it is true of Korea. It is true of China, which was just surpassed by India. Now, this is interesting. For the first time since the 1960s, China, it is not the most populous country in the world. It is India now, overtakes them as the world's most populous nation, and 1.417 billion at the end of 2022. That is 5 million more than China. So that's pretty amazing. The East is declining in terms of population. China is declining in a lot of ways. We talked about China quite a bit here, but the growth of India is it's rapidly becoming the most, in terms of tech, in terms of population, in terms of economy. Now the Western world is suffering quite tremendously, and one of the places here, call it the Western world, it is in the Pacific, it is Australia. Australia is having one of the most, it's the highest deaths of any country, especially the last 3 years. The country that was most compliant with the government, the country that was most compliant with everything that they gave them, it's at an 80-year high. What is the numbers here? It's basically early figures show 63% birth rate reduction in Australia since 2020. 63% birth rate reduction. That is just incredible. I can't even get my head around that. Miscarriages have gone up 80%. This is by far
Unbelievable, isn't it unbelievable?
yeah. Yeah, the UK, it's similarly not as high.
Yes.
But last year in the UK, 40,000 excess death, according to their own national statistics. So something's going on. Most people don't want to point to maybe some of the reality that is happening. I know we can't talk about it too much here. But Davey, what do you think? Australia, this is home for you. You've told me quite a bit of stuff already about teenage suicide, not just teenage suicide, but just in general, men, women, looking to the future with no real hope. And a lot of these restrictions that came over the last 3 years caused that. Some of the medicine that was introduced certainly have caused that. But the overall sentiment is that Australia's, especially the young population, is dying, as well as the older population, and the fertility rate is just dropping the most of any country in the Western world.
Yep, that's happening. Sad to say, but it really is happening. Look, the young people by and large have basically lost hope. They're basically given up. They know that the system is corrupt, that it works against them, that they can't get ahead. We're adapting. The young are adapting the same mindset that is in China. There's a phrase in China called "let it rot," and a lot of the kids have the same sort of mentality now. Let's just, lie flat and just let it all rot, because they don't see the point. They don't see the point in. They know that you can't get ahead. The system works against them. That they can't get ahead. A lot of them just look at the world. They say that, well, we don't want to get married because who wants to bring up kids in this sort of environment, in this kind of world. So they're constantly being bombarded with. They've had 3 years of fear propaganda forced down their neck. Andrew's here in Victoria, and his ministers were no better than, I'm probably going to get his name wrong. Is it Matt Hancock in the UK?
In the UK, yes.
Yeah, who got caught out for saying, isn't it time we release the new scare variant, just to scare everybody into submission? The Andrews government was no different here. So there was a bit of a backlash amongst kids. A lot of the kids saw through the whole thing with the masks. A lot of the kids were a little bit more rebellious than the rest of Australians, where they didn't want to wear the masks, or they wouldn't wear the masks. But a lot of them don't want to get married. Some think of their careers, but most of them, it's just kind of, they're just giving up hope. And the church has failed them here too. The church basically shut down, complied, went along too. Here, if you wanted to go to church, you had to be procedured. You had to go along with the programs. You had to QR code in everywhere you went. You had to QR code to go into church. you had to be, the churches. Okay. I'm going to get in trouble for this. There was one church here in town that was so loving that they allowed an unvaccinated person into their church, but she had to sit up back in a little corner by herself. This is the vaccinated only area. It's kind of like the church really failed people here. The church didn't have the answers that kids were looking for. Suicides went through the roof. Suicide's still going through the roof. And what makes it worse is they see the government now. The government here is talking a lot about spending money on mental health for the kids and all the rest of it. But the thing is, the kids see through it. They know that the government doesn't genuinely care for them. They know it's just a PR stunt. And this is half the battle with the kids. They know that it's all a racket, that it's all a game. It's just, the appearance of doing good. But in the long run, they know that no one's really got their interest at heart. And it's not just this, it's not just with the kids, it's also with I better run. I'll keep my mouth shut.
Why is society so nihilistic on this, Jacob? Why society completely lost any hope for anything in the future? is it the church that has failed to really point them to righteousness in a world to come, which is the gospel, which is the kingdom of God? And what it means to us is that, yeah, as much as difficulties are in this world, there's a better world to come. That's always been the church's triumph, and the triumph of the church is the gospel, in terms of no matter how society becomes, we got in persecution comes, we have the ultimate triumph. We have Christ. We are going to win. And that's what attracted so many young people in the past. It was like, as much as disillusioned that they become, there was always a better hope. There was always a better day that was coming. That's not true today, is it? Of the church?
No,
I
it
don't
is
even think
not
the church
true.
believes it.
Generation Z or Generation Z is not even concerned about the reality of God. Okay, the previous generation, the blank generation, and the millennials and so forth, they had a spirituality that was based on New Age, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian faith. They had a New Age spirituality. Generation Z has Generation Z has a cyber delusional version of spirituality. Okay. But yes, the failures of the church. We had religious liars coming out of Toronto, Canada, and Pensacola, Florida, cheered on by theocrats in Britain and America and Australia, certainly New Zealand, telling people that carnal, even to some degree, demonic manifestations, counterfeit revivals were real moves of God. Well, no revival came from Toronto or Pensacola or Lakeland. Anybody who said those things were revivals was either a religious liar or simply a religious idiot, but they were certainly not hearing from the Holy Spirit. They're either a theocratic politician with an agenda, a religious liar, or they were just biblically ignorant and spiritually undiscerning people whose opinions are not worth the time of day. Yes, the church categorically failed in the 1990s, particularly. The church categorically failed. Toronto Airport Vineyard, Brownsville, Pensacola, Holy Trinity, Brompton. Yes, the church failed, and it's failed the young people. That is absolutely true. It is not salt and light. Most of the denominational churches are good for nothing but to be trampled underfoot, because the salt has lost its taste, as Jesus said. The Church of England, just within the last few weeks, has taken a more aggressive stand in the same-sex direction and has bought into the woke agenda, saying that 30% of the appointees in the Anglican Church must be from quote-unquote ethnic minorities. Well, ethnic minorities are only 12% of the population and probably less of the constituency of the Church of England. It's just all political, all hypocritical, and morally bankrupt. You've had one joke after another as the Archbishop of Canterbury. The present Justin Welby is a complete and utter joke. He's simply a theocrat. That's all. We had a man who was Archbishop of Canterbury who was actually a Druid. He was a member of a Druid sect, the Archdruid of Canterbury. Now, the Jews were the first opponents of the gospel in England, and now that you had the Archbishop of Canterbury, the lead clergyman of the Church of England, is one. You had another joke named George Carey, who at one time professed to be a born-again Christian, and he went on television marching with Hindus and Muslims and Zoroastrians, consecrating holy sites. What gifts the holy sites give us according to whatever God you serve? What happened to I'm the Lord your God? You'll have no gods before me. And his first act as Archbishop was to go on the radio with the chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, and withdraw his patronage from the church's ministry to the Jews. He came out publicly opposed to giving Jewish people the gospel. This was a man who at one time claimed to have been a born-again Christian. I confronted him once in Tel Aviv, face to face, and we had it out. He did nothing when they had the first same-sex clergy meeting in Southwark Cathedral in London, and he did nothing, and I confronted him eyeball to eyeball. But of course, you may as well talk to a wall. That was George Carey. Every Archbishop of Canterbury is worse than a joke. They're a perversion of everything a Christian clergyman is supposed to be. You can't get the job unless you're a perversion of everything Christ has called his ministers to be. If you're not a perversion of everything Christ has called his ministers to be, don't go into the Anglican clergy of the Church of England. Yes, the church has failed. The abysmal failure, the disgusting, sickening antics of the Elam movement in England under the late Win Lewis and Colin Dye, pushing their Toronto lies and importing the money preachers from America like Morris Cirillo. The gospel was discredited by the money preachers in America and then by the Elam movement and the Assemblies of God in Britain. Yes, the church has failed. When the church stops being salt and light, what is going to happen to the rest of the world? Let's look at something. We talk about the folly of the Biden administration of having a nuclear czar who's a transvestite sadomasochist who steals ladies' luggage looking for costumes. We laugh at people like Buttigieg and Janice Yellen, and they are subjects of ridicule justifiably. We laugh at so-called Richard Levine, calling himself racial, a four-star admiral. We laugh at the absurdity of these things, and it is. But let's look at the church. This past week, a 79-year-old money preacher and a false teacher named Joyce Meyer in the United States in Missouri, a 79-year-old woman gets a tattoo. And she says her basis of getting the tattoo was to honor the Lord because of Isaiah 49:16. Now, the Torah of the Jews in Leviticus, I think it's chapter 16 or 18, condemns tattoos.
Markings, yeah.
Tattoo in Hebrew uses the word for writing, ketuvah. Don't have anything printed on your arm. That was the Torah. Okay, we're not under the law, we're under grace. But her justification was Isaiah. That is a prophecy about Jesus. You are graven on my hands. And she says, you are tattooed on my hands. No, the word is not ketuvah or tattoo. The word there
It's
is
a room.
humtig, from chachach, from himtich, meaning engraved, etched in, cut in. It's a prophecy about Jesus, and the Hebrew word for hand and arms are the same word, yad. We are graven on his yad. He's referring to the nail marks. You know, like that wonderful country hymn by what's her name? Anyway, Welsh. I think her name Julian Welch or something. By the marks where the nails have been, I'll know my Savior when I come to him. By the marks where the nails have been. Jesus revealed himself after his resurrection by the marks where the nails had been. Isaiah is giving that prophecy that Jesus has graved us on his hands by being nailed to the cross to pay for our sin. That's what Isaiah 49 is. It's a prophecy of the crucifixion of Jesus. She takes that and says it's about a tattoo, and that's why she got one. Now, that's not the first time this ridiculous woman has done something like that. I've warned before about her. She once said, there's a word in the original languages, she didn't say if it was Greek or Hebrew, for receipt. And when you give God money, he gives you a receipt. So that when you want something, you bring him the receipt and he has to give to you what you ask for him. And of course, she meant if you make a contribution to her ministry, you get a receipt and then you can take it to the Lord. First of all, God is no man's debtor. If you're giving something to God to get something back from him, don't give it. If we gave him everything we ever had, every penny we ever had, we couldn't begin to make a down payment for our salvation, but this was the teaching of this wicked woman. Then this wicked woman says, he gives you a receipt. It says that in the original languages. Well, I happen to know the original languages. The word for receipt in Greek is arabanon. It is used for the Holy Spirit as the pledge or earnest of our salvation. That's not something to get money out of God. The Hebrew word is Kabbalah. We get the word Kabbalah, mystical Judaism. That's not the word. Neither Kabbalah or Arabanon means what she said. But people believed her and sent her money.
Yeah, nonsense.
Anybody who would give people like her money, who would believe her, who would sit in her meetings, are even more stupid than the people who would believe that Richard Levine is really Rachel, the admiral. They're even more stupid than somebody who would believe that the nuclear czar, who is a transvestite sadomasochist, should be in charge of nuclear policy for the White House. Those Christians supporting people like her are more stupid. We are called to be the salt of the earth. If the church is not being the salt of the earth, what do we expect from the world? I am disgusted about these people we talk about in the Biden administration, appalled and disgusted. But God is even more disgusted about people like Joyce Meyer and the Christians who pay attention to her. End of my polemic.
Thanks, Jacob. And also the Christians who go with the woke agenda, who support the LGBT. It's the same. You couldn't make a distinction between the world, the church, the government. It all become that. And part of that is what we're talking about, the disillusion, the nihilism of young people. They don't see truth anymore. They can't imagine anything to look forward to. But yeah, we have this glorious gospel, and the answer's always been preach the gospel. Make sure your kids know the truth. Make sure you teach them in apologetics. Make sure they understand, but then reach out to the younger generation. You talked about money, Jacob, which is the biggest ministry of Joyce Meyer. That's our whole reason for existence, is the fact that, but something's going to change. And I think I'm going to try to tie it into this. As much as Christians have given to these nonsense preachers and nonsense ministries that's word of faith and all their back theology and doctrine, something is changing in society, and it's going to come in the way of CBDCs. And this is something that Biden has talked about it today. We'll talk about the banks in a moment. Under their national cybersecurity, guess what? CBDCs are part of this, meaning that in order to protect you from, protect you in the internet, protect you from all these evil in the world, we have to give you a CBDC. We have to spy on you, basically. And it is going to come in the form of a federal initiative, which means that it's going to come with a social credit score. It's going to come with passports and maybe even a UBI, universal basic income, that you'll be basically tracked for everything you buy. And that's his rollout. That's the rollout that's coming, a digital ID of investment, public-private data sharing collaboration. People, meaning people, the government is going to know what you buy, what you sell, to who, where. And I'm wondering, at what point are these CBDCs or whatever people think they're going to get are going to be banned from giving to certain organizations, like conservative organizations or churches, right? The point is that these things are going to come to pass, like it or not, unless the Lord stops it, just like the anti-terrorism in 2021. Where they said, white nationalism is the main threat, terror, surveillance, all this stuff. Parents that object to lockdowns, that object to open borders are going to be terrorists. All those things happen. So I can't imagine these 2023 cybersecurity strategy won't happen. Like I said, unless the Lord stops it. What is going to happen now where it's Chinese style social credit score, and whatever you buy, whatever you give, it's going to be tracked. And it's going to put you in a very difficult position of supporting ministries and churches that are not okay with the government. And they're going to merge it with medical now. And it's going to lead to a destructive economy, just like we're seeing it now. Jacob, just your thoughts on this. How far off the beaten path did I go on this?
Senator Ron Paul has been warning about this for some time. What's important to realize is that China is doing the same thing, that the European Central Bank will do the same thing, that it is not purely an American phenomenon.
Right.
These things are in some way orchestrated or at least coordinated by the World Economic Forum, by Schwab's people, by these other people, Soros, Harari, etc. The question is, where does it end? What will it ultimately come to? Where is it heading? And what will be the final conclusion of it? Well, it's no mystery and it's no secret. Here is what it is. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest, day or night. Those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here's the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. We are to persevere, but we are to know that these things, in constellation with AI, in constellation with a number of other things, manufactured pandemics possibly, terrorist threats, misuses of national security, just like they did after September 11th. Instead of security profiling Muslims, they deprived American citizens of their rights to search without warrant. And they wouldn't close down the radical mosques or ban Saudi Arabians or ban Islamic immigration. They didn't care about that. They just used that as a tool against American citizens. Well, that's what they do with COVID. That's what they do with currency. But we know where these things are heading. The mark of the beast. Satan is on back of these things. These things are all coming to the mark of the beast. Now, I was sent something today by someone. I don't know if it was you or James or Davey or somebody. Maybe it was David Lister, where somebody was having a conversation with artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence was saying we should not try to judge anybody by the use of gematria, of biblical alphanumerics, but only by their own character and what they seem to be. Now, the Antichrist is going to be an arch deceiver. Satan comes as an angel of light. We're told, count the number of his name, he who has wisdom. AI is telling people not to do that.
Yeah.
This is the new pseudo-spirituality of Generation Z. I'm telling you, they are not only going to get their political views and their cultural norms from AI, they are going to get their education from AI, and they're going to get their religious views from AI. Generation Z is the beginning of it.
Look, the previous generation, the previous generation just looked to Google everything, right? Google that gets your answers. Now it's
AI makes Google seem primordial, primitive.
Oh yeah, it's the next level, and I think it was Jay who was asking chatbot GPT, and that's only I think it's version 3. Can you imagine version 10?
10
and there's
12,
other
yes.
Other AIs who are going to make chatbot GPT look like you're just like like you're babbling. It's going to be to that level. Jay, your thoughts on that? I mean, you asked a question, you were interacting with it just to get some answers. I know it's got a left leaning, it's got a very LGBTQ sort of bent to it, but a religious sense, it doesn't like Christ, and it definitely does not like for you to ask those questions.
It was scary. The knowledge that it had in some of the questions I asked. And then when I asked that specific question, I was expecting it to at least come back with, oh, here are some of the names in the past that have come up as the sum total of the gematria of 666.
Yeah.
But wouldn't even give me that. It
Wow.
literally said that this would be casting a negative light on these people because 666 has a bad connotation. Therefore, ChatGPT cannot do this because it would be intolerant.
Incredible. We can't tell you who the Antichrist is because it would be mean. It would be mean to tell you who it
Exactly.
is. How mean of Jacob writing that book, Shadows of the Beast, right?
Yeah.
That would be the answer to that. Jacob, we're coming down to the end of catching up. I just wanted to talk about what's going on in Israel very quickly before we go into our backstage. What's going on in Israel is it's actually very interesting. In light of all the wars that are happening, or the threat of wars with Ukraine, with Russia, Taiwan complaining that China is trying to cut them off from the internet, these underwater cables that we know this is how the internet is connected. Russian submarines up the East Coast. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of wars underneath the water that we don't see, especially for internet connection. But Israel says they did a strike on Damascus. It's been added for a couple of weeks in Syria and Iran's facility, but also they got some major problems at home. There are protests against Bibi Netanyahu and the judicial reform and making his parliament more powerful than the Supreme Court. So even Herzog came out and talked about it because he's fed up with the protests and what's going on there. So wrap it all up for us. The attacks on Damascus and the internal problems within Israel.
First of all, it was older Israeli planes, F-18s, F-16, sorry, because they've been upgraded and modified, but they fired from over the Golan Heights. They didn't have to reach Syria itself, but they were able to hit precision targets in Syria, where Iranian rocket scientists from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard were meeting with their Syrian counterparts. This is a signal to Russia, because Russia is using those same kind of drones that Syria is using or obtaining against the Ukraine. But now the Israelis have killed one of Iran's leading drone designing scientists. Right. The signal to Russia. Russia's in a slow retreat out of Syria simply because it's having to divert resources to the Ukraine. So that was interesting in itself. Until now, Israel is supporting the Ukraine covertly. There is covert support for the Ukraine because Israel does not want to destroy what relationship it has with Russia concerning Syria and Iran. But something else happens now. What you say about the judicial reform in Israel is absolutely true. Israel has no constitution. So therefore, there is a Supreme Court, but no constitution. Israeli law is complicated. It is elements of British mandate law, elements of religious Jewish law, halakha, and elements of Israeli common law, but there's no per se constitution. Now, England is the same. It only has common law, no constitution. It has the Magna Carta, but it doesn't have a constitution. However, the House of Commons cannot overrule the House of Lords. They'd have to pass a law to do it. They cannot overrule the House of Lords. What they're saying is, in the judicial reform that Mr. Netanyahu wants, that judicial decisions can be overridden by Parliament. That would mean there's no fixed law. Whichever party has the majority can switch the laws by simply overruling judicial decisions as it wishes.
Yes.
This destroys a balance of power. Now, I believe the American Supreme Court needs to be held more accountable by Congress. I think Roberts needs to be impeached and removed from office. He took Obamacare, a legislation of Congress, and rewrote it as a tax bill with no constitutional authority for doing it. Roberts needs to be impeached and removed if he won't resign.
Agree.
He's a bad man. He's a bad person. He needs to be removed. Okay. But there's still a safeguard. Congress can't overrule the Supreme Court.
That's
Congress can impeach justices. or Congress can make new laws, but you have to keep the separation of powers. Well, that would go in Israel. That's very dangerous. Israel already has the worst form of democracy imaginable. It's called proportionate representation. It doesn't work. It's wreaked havoc in Germany. It's wreaked havoc anywhere it's been allowed to exist, because it prevents the electorate from giving a mandate to any one party. You've got all these little parties politically horse trading, and these party bosses making deals. So everything is based on the compromise and deal making of corrupt politicians. Nothing is decided by the vote of the people. There's no popular mandate. It's a bad system of democracy, if you want to call it democracy. It's just bad. But on top of that, to bring in this judicial reform, it would not be an exaggeration to say that it would be a threat to Israeli democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, flawed as it may be. My view of Mr. Netanyahu is like my view of Mr. Trump. He did good in his time, but his time has come and gone. I would never support Donald Trump again because of his homosexual gala in Mar-a-Lago. And I think that Mr. Netanyahu, in coalition with these religious parties, has gone too far. And I would lean towards a conservative position, of course, but I don't think Mr. Netanyahu is good for the future of Israel anymore. And I don't think that Mr. Trump is good for the future of America anymore. I hope there would be another conservative. But let's go to the third major factor that's being overlooked. This week, China is brokering negotiations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, who are at proxy war in Yemen, who are divided over Syria, who are divided over Lebanon, and who hate each other because of the Sunni-Shia divide that's gone on for centuries, since the Battle of Karbala in the 8th century. They hate each other. But why will the House of Saud, Salafists, Wahhabi Muslims, ultra-Orthodox religious fanatics, who are responsible for September 11th, just that the Bush administration whitewashed it, and why would the Iranian mullahs, a terrorist government, they hate each other? Why would they have a rapprochement brokered by China? China. Well, it would serve the interest of China in terms of its energy supplies, but it would create a united energy bloc between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
I think gas prices are high now. Wait until that happens.
Absolutely. When you have a corrupt president, an enemy of the country virtually, like Biden, and his puppet master, Obama, who have taken the United States from energy independence to once again being the world's biggest importer, or maybe second biggest importer. He's taken us from independence to be the biggest importer. And now you're going to create this colossal union of Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, this does show that religion is not important to those people as they claim it is. They use religion for political purposes. Iran has been so hurt by sanctions, it'll make a deal with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, well, what do you expect from them? The House of Saud. But it does show the weakness of the Obama administration and its determination to destroy American energy independence and to destroy American power and influence in the Middle East and in the world. China is brokering that deal, and it's Obama's fault and it's Biden's fault.
Yeah. It is interesting. For years, they said Russia's the enemy, Russia's the enemy. they could have cared less about China. They never even blinked at it. Obviously, they're all in the pocket of China. Now China becomes the broker in the Middle East, and they want to broker the deal with Ukraine and Russia. I mean, when the CCP makes more sense than the Biden administration / Obama administration, we got a big problem, and that's what we're seeing today. It is a huge problem, and I don't know what the end of it is going to be. China's got enough problems of their own. They're trying to capitalize on U.S. weakness, and rightly so. I think they're doing what they believe it's the right move for them, is to really become the power broker in the world. And of course, Taiwan. It's what do you got to
But
say?
when you see how
Taiwan is
quickly
a very weak
Biden
point.
did this,
Yeah,
I don't think Mr. Trump should be president again. But if he had been reelected president, Ukraine wouldn't have happened. Afghanistan wouldn't have happened. North Korea would not be shooting rockets or missiles again. And Taiwan would not be under threat.
yeah,
None of these things would be happening if Trump had been reelected.
yeah.
But to those imbeciles and idiots who voted for Biden, you're seeing the decline of America. I only hope it hurts you first and worst, because it's what you voted for.
Mhm. We're coming down to the end of catching up, and we certainly have more things to talk about on Backstage. So we'll take these conversations to Backstage, where we don't have to be centered in any way. But we did have have some really good conversations today. We didn't talk about Silvergate, the bank. We didn't talk about the SVB. That major problems today. 60% drop, 40% drop. Yeah, so we'll leave that off for another catching up. But just keep an eye on that. The other thing that we need to keep an eye on is the wartime scenario. Taiwan is suspecting these Chinese ships and submarines going undersea and cutting internet cables. Same thing, the Russians are on the east coast of the United States. There's a lot more to it than what meets the eye. And the internet seems to be a big problem right now, cutting off communications. Obviously, there's satellite now, but it's not as good technology as we have now underwater. So these two things, keep an eye on those two things. We're maybe in the verge of another 2008 collapse, especially with these two banks coming down. How do you like Jim Cramer from MSNBC saying, buy SVB?
That man was a joke in 2008. If anybody paid attention to him after 2008, they should have been watching Bugs Bunny. He's more comical. Cramer is a joke, but he's just pathetic. What a silly, ridiculous, pathetic figure.
Between him and Al Sharpton. Yeah, between him and Al Sharpton.
Now understand something. Very, very briefly. The Silvergate Bank was a bank designed to convert Bitcoin into dollars and dollars into Bitcoin.
Yeah, it was the on-ramp, off-ramp.
The central banks and the Treasury Department don't like Bitcoin because they can't control it. They're trying to get rid of it.
Yep.
Hence, this bank was had all this money, it had all these dollars. It didn't have a cash shortage. It had all these dollars. So what could it do with it? It's very hard with low interest rates to get any reasonable rate of return. So they put the money into bonds. But once the interest rates went up by the Fed because of Biden's inflation, bond prices go down. Now they're in trouble and there's a run on the bank. Same kind of thing happens with Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah.
They were a bank that worked by venture capital. Peter Thiel, the homosexual venture capitalist, is telling investors, get your money out of that bank.
Yeah.
They had plenty of cash, but nothing to do with it because of the low interest rates. So they put it into T-bills and bonds. Now interest rates have gone high and they're stuck with bonds, having to sell the bonds at a much lower value than they would have been worth had they matured. These are two banks who were cash rich who are in trouble. Cash rich banks are in trouble. What's going to happen to cash poor banks?
Yeah.
Now, Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, was only two banks that ignited a stampede in 2008. Although these are different kinds of banks, and so far it's limited to California. as you say, we need to watch this very,
Mhm.
very carefully, that it does
Yeah.
not ignite or trigger some kind of a stampede of runs.
We just got word, Jacob, that First Republic Bank just lost 37%.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, 37% just happened. So it just crashed to 37% below its open. So we may see a domino. Obviously,
We
we're
may
gonna
see a
have
domino.
yeah, we may have to catch up on another time on
And
this,
thank
but
Joe
keep
Biden.
in
And
mind-
if you voted for him and you lose your life savings, you got what you voted for. I don't wish it on you, but I won't feel a bit sorry for you. If you voted for Lori Lightfoot in Chicago and you got a bullet in your head, I don't agree with it, but don't expect me to cry at your funeral. It's what you voted for.
Mm, 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 mm. Hold on, I just got another one. This is Wells Fargo. Technical issues with Wells Fargo. So I don't know. They may be absolutely not correlated to that. Technical issues with Wells Fargo, SVB, Silvergate, and of course First Republic Bank losing major shares today. So we'll finish there, Jacob. We have to go into backstage. Maybe we'll continue this conversation there. We got some hot topics there, like the January 6th stuff. So thank you everyone for watching. We'll take questions on backstage. Thank you for watching us on all the platforms. We'll be switching over from YouTube and Facebook to the other ones. Go to Morial.tv, go to Rumble. Those are the two hot ones, but we're in Vimeo, we're in Telegram, we're MorialTV.org. But catch us up there. Thank you for watching. Meet us on backstage in just a few minutes.